Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Monica Seni from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss about module Personal Identification under the Forensic Anthropology paper. After going through this module, you will be able to understand the concept and need of personal identification, complete and partial identification, the medico-legal aspects of identity, the identification process in the living and dead. In this module, you will also have the knowledge of primary and secondary characteristics of identification. And in the last, this module will tell you about different methods of personal identification. So students, let us see what is personal identification and how does it work. The personal identification is defined as the determination of the individuality of a person. It also refers to the process of linking an unknown personal object or material, which may be a whole body, a skeleton, a fingerprint, a biological fluid, or it could be anything else, back to an individual of a known identity. The personal identification is a key issue in forensic anthropology and consists of the correct assignment of an identity to an unknown corpse. Although it may seem an easy and automatic procedure, the mechanism of identification encompasses several difficulties concerning the methods and above all the significance of identification process in court. The process of identification strives towards two conclusions: exclusion and positive identification. Personal identification, which is a mainstay of forensic science, can be classified into two categories. The first category is complete identification. Complete identification is the absolute fixation or exact specification of the individuality of a person, along with the determination of exact place in the community occupied by him. Whereas partial identification refers to the ascertainment of only some facts about the identity, while other remains still unknown. Partial identification may assist in complete or total identification of a person. For example, an anonymous person is identified as a female who is Christian, about 40 years of age, having 6 feet height, but whereabout regarding her family, occupation, etc. are not known. Need of personal identification is very crucial in living as well as in dead. In case of living persons, identification is required for forensic and criminal purposes. Under civil cases, identification is required in case of false personation, inheritance of property, pension, life insurance, voting rights, passport, disputed sex, in case of missing person, or in case of lost memory patients. Whereas identification is required in criminal cases in the case of identification of accused, which includes sexual assault, murder, sexual offences, absconding soldiers, interchange of newborn babies, criminal abortion, or impersonation in criminal cases. Identification is again needed in case of dead person. It is required in case of natural mass disasters like earthquakes, tsunamis, landslides, or floods, and it is also needed in man-made disasters like bomb explosions, fire, air crash, building collapse, railway accidents, body recovers from sea, canals, or when the body is highly decomposed or dismembered to deliberately conceal the identity of an individual. Now I will talk about the historical record of identification. In ancient times, criminals were punished by mutilation and branding. This was the first attempt towards subsequent identification. The branding technique disappeared less than a century ago in Russia and then in France. About 1840, the Belgian statistician Quetelet stated that there are no two human beings in the world of exactly the same size. This theory is said to have been used for the first time for criminological purposes by Stevens. The first accurate system for description of prisoners, also called portrait parler, which is a French term and refers to spoken picture, was devised by Bertillon. In its original form, the portrait parler was divided into four categories, that is, determination of color, morphological determination, general determinations, and description of indelible marks. Alphonse Bertillon in 1879, who was a French criminologist, first developed the anthropometric system of physical measurements of body parts, especially components of the head and face, to produce a detailed description of an individual. This system, also known as the Bertillon system or Bertillonage, and it is widely used as a reliable scientific method of criminal investigation. This table shows you different physical measurements and data that were included in this system. The first was descriptive data, which consisted of colors of eyes, hair, complexion, shape of nose, ear, and chin. Then body measurements consisted of height, head length, head breadth, arm span, sitting height, left middle finger length, left little finger length, left foot length, right ear length, cheek width, and cubit. It also consisted of different body marks, which includes moles, scars, and tattoo marks. Then finally, it consisted of photographs, which includes the front and the right profile of the head. These measurements, along with photographs, were recorded on cardboard, which were kept in a specially arranged cabinet. By dividing each of the measurements into small, medium, and large grouping, Bertillon could place the dimension of any single person into one of the 243 distinct categories. This image is depicting the Bertillon system of identification, in which different body measurements and front and right profile of an individual is shown. In earlier times, personal identification was also done by genetic testing. In this technique, antigens on the red blood cells, were used to identify an individuals. Antigens themselves are not alleles, but are the result of what allele is encoded by a person's DNA. The 6 different major blood group systems that have been used for human identification are ABO, RH, MNS, Kell, Duffy, and Kidd. Discovery of the ABO system and that each blood group is derived from a genetic locus was the beginning of genetic testing for human identification. This table shows you the identification of ABO blood types by agglutination. As you can see, blood group A consists of antigen A, blood group B consists of antigen B, and blood group AB consisted of both antigen A and B, and in blood type O, both antigens are absent. Medico-legal aspects of identity. Identification of a living is usually carried out by the police. However, where medical knowledge is required for elucidation of disputed facts, a medical examiner may be consulted. Experts who are involved in personal identification may include pathologists, physicians, dentists, anatomists, physical anthropologists, and experts in evaluation of various traces. Accurate identification is mandatory for the establishment of corpus delicti. The term corpus delicti means the body of offense or the body of crime. In a charge of homicide, it includes positive identification of the dead body and proof of its death by criminal act of the accused. The examination of a person for the purpose of identification should not be undertaken without obtaining his free consent, and at the same time it should be explained to him that the facts noted might go in evidence against him. Now we will see how the living persons are identified. Identification in the living person is justified for various reasons. Identification of living almost exclusively dependent on recognition by personal impressions until the fingerprint was recognized as a powerful means of identification. It is still being employed as a part of the investigation of crime to hold identification parades. The suspect or the accused is included in a group of persons or approximately similar build, age, and appearance, and witnesses are invited to point out one of them as the alleged criminal. The identification of living person is based entirely on known fingerprints or birthmarks or several personal impressions with regard to characteristics, gestures, movement, shape, and other features of the teeth, eyes, hair, or voice, but it is liable to mistakes. These methods require the services of different experts with reasonable experiences. Fingerprints, palm prints, toe prints are unique as a means of identification, both in living as well as in dead. They may be included like testing of mental caliber, educational level in the living, which for the obvious reasons cannot be applied to the dead. Photography is also an important aid in identification of living, but may be of not much use in the identification of dead. Appreciable changes exaggerated by the decomposition process can occur in features after death. However, it may also be wrong to assume that excellent photographs never lead to an error in the identification of living persons. The identification of dead body sometimes becomes very difficult owing to its rapid decomposition in the hot season or through damage caused by wild animals when exposed on the outskirts of a city or village. The problem of identifying a recently dead person whose features, clothes, fingers are intact is totally different from identifying the same person dying in the same fashion but whose naked body is discovered in a field, and that too in a peak of summer or rainy season. The longer the interval between the death and examination of the body or remains, the greater creeps the need for varying experts in establishing identification. The examination of a person for the purpose of identification is based on the presence of a number of data or techniques. These data are classified into three categories. The first one is the primary characteristics, which includes age, sex, and stature of a person. These characteristics cannot be altered after death. Second is secondary characteristics, that is, features, personal effect, which consist of pocket contents, clothes, including any marks, defects, stitching, jewelry, etc. Or the secondary characteristics also consist of hairs, scars, tattoos, external peculiarities, which includes deformities, whether natural or due to disease. Third category is comparative data or techniques, which are dental patterns or restorations, fingerprints, footprints, superimposition techniques, neutron activation analysis, anthropometry, and other fortuitous comparisons. This table shows you the different information which is usually noted for the purpose of identification, and it includes race, sex, age, complexion and features, hair, anthropometry, footprints, deformities, scars, tattoo marks, occupation marks, handwriting, clothes and personal articles, speech, gait, tricks of manner and habit, mental power, memory and education, and miscellaneous methods of identification. These diagrams show you the different features or informations which are used for personal identification. Now, I will give you a brief introduction of all these features. The first feature is race, which is a population concept and differs in the frequency of genes. There are three main types of races: Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroids. The particular race of a person can be determined on the basis of skull, forehead, skin color, hair form, facial form, and eye form. Second feature is sex. It is easy to determine sex in normal cases from external appearance and inspection of genitals, but it becomes difficult in case of intersex, concealed sex, advanced decomposed body, and in the skeleton. Sex of a person can be determined by physical morphology, bone study, microscopic study of sex chromatin, gonadal biopsy, hormonal study, and dental methods. Next is age. Age of a person can be determined by physical or morphological features, some laboratory test, or age can also be estimated by teeth and ossification of activities and growth of bones. Then we have complexion and features. The complexion of a person may be fair, whitish, colored, dark, brown, or shallow. The color may vary in different environmental conditions. The facial features include eyes, nose, lips, chin, ear, and teeth. These features may change considerably from disease, dissipation, aging, or due to stress. The next source of identification is hair. Hair forms an important means of identification as it resists putrefaction and the effect of dyeing, bleaching, cutting off heat can be noticed in the hair texture. Examination of hair is also of considerable help in crime detection as it is frequently found at the scene of crime. Next is anthropometry and dactylography. Anthropometry system is widely used for personal identification. It refers to the body measurements and deals with the measurements of the various parts of the human body. It is also called Bertillon system. Bertilloners introduced it in 1882. It is based on the principle that after 21 years of age, no change occurs in the measurement of various parts of body. Therefore, this system is applicable to adults only. Dactylography, also known as fingerprint system, and consists in taking the impressions of the bulb of the fingers and thumbs on an unglazed white paper and examining with magnifying glass. It is based on the principle that skin of the balls of the fingers and thumbs is covered with particular ridges, the arrangement and distribution of which remains constant throughout the life. Next we have footprints. Footprints are impressions of foot or boots left behind a person walking or running. The careful observation of a footprint reveals many interesting facts regarding his mode of walking or running and may be as specific as a fingerprint of an individual. Deformities are good source of identification both in living and dead. It may be congenital or acquired. Congenital deformities include cleft palate, hair lip, supernumerary fingers, supplementary memory, web fingers, birthmarks, and moles, whereas acquired deformities are malunited and ununited fractures of the bones of extremities. Then we have scars. A scar or cicatrix is fibrous tissue covered by epithelium formed as a result of the healing of a wound or injury in which there has been a breach of continuity of substance. A scar can be linear, broad, circular, and irregular depending on the original wound. Next is tattoo marks. Tattoo marks provide wide information about the person possessing them. Their designs vary from initials to gods of worship and even those indicating emblems of moral depravity art. These tattoo marks can be permanent or temporary. Next is occupation marks. Occupational marks are helpful in identifying a person as certain occupational work leave marks on hand or feet by which individuals involved in them may be identified. For example, horny and rough hands are noticed among the persons who do hard manual labor. Handwriting is another good source of identification, especially in case of questioned or altered documents. Alteration in handwriting can be noticed in case of mental and nervous disease, tremors, and rheumatic disease of joints of hand. Different patterns of handwriting are also noticeable in case of variations in nationality, occupations, and ethnicities. Next information which is included for the identification is clothes and personal article. Clothes and ornaments can provide a valuable source of identification in case of mass disaster. In living persons, clothes and personal articles do not form any essential piece of evidence for identification, as the individual can change these articles at their own will. Next is speech and voice. Peculiarities of speech, for example, stammering, stuttering, lip-sync, and nasal tongue assist in the process of identification. Voice is also affected in nervous disease such as cerebrovascular episodes, general paralysis of the insane, and disseminated sclerosis. Gait of a person can also be used as an important information to identify an individual. A person can also be recognized from his gait or body contour, but it may be altered by an accident or disease such as hemiplegia, spastic paraplegia. Then we have tricks of manners and habit. Identification based on manner and habit is generally hereditary. For example, repetitive jerky movement of the shoulder or muscle of the face. Next is mental power, memory, and education. These information are also useful in establishing the identity of the person, especially in case of imposture. Finally, we have some miscellaneous methods of identification such as electrocardiogram or vectorcardiogram. These features may be useful in the identification of individuals as no two cardiograms are alike. DNA fingerprinting and lip prints are another modern source of identification. So students, let us summarize what we have learnt in this module. Identification is the determination of an individuality of a person. It deals with the recognition and verification of a person. This identification process is done in living or dead persons by recognizing or identifying certain features or characteristics that are unique to that person. Identification also has certain medico-legal importance in civil or criminal cases. There are a number of sources by which a person may be identified, which includes race, age, sex, stature, complexion, hair, fingerprints, footprints, anthropometry, personal effects, deformities, scar, handwriting, and mannerism. Sex, age, and stature. These are the primary characteristics of personal identification, whereas the personal effects, handprints, footprints, deformities, scar, handwriting, mannerism, these features come under the secondary characteristics which help in complete identification of an individual. Thank you.